Hello, everybody. Good to see you. I think we will sing one more nigun. Thank you to Aaron and Yedidia for their music, their nigunim. We'll have one more nigun that we will play, and then we will start. Hopefully, give the opportunity for more people to join. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the Farbrengen. It was supposed to be a joyful post Lag Ba'omer, pre-Shavuot Farbrengen, right between the time of Lag Ba'omer and the time of Shavuot, trying to bridge those two deep holidays. But things went a little differently, and we feel like it's very important for us to address what happened, I think, to the Jewish world in the past 2 days. And still, we are not. We made a decision not to cancel the Farbrengen, but exactly the opposite. To do it with more life and with more, to be more vibrant, like Rav Steinsaltz taught us, and we will talk about this also in the Farbrengen today. I just remind you the rules. We have very specific rules in this Farbrengen, which is actually the fourth Farbrengen that we're doing. So it's already, we have a tradition of Farbrengens in Shalhevet. And the rule number one is that since it's a Zoom meeting and not we're not meeting in person, when a person speaks, all the rest of us are on mute, so we could all hear what the person says. But when we say L'chaim, everybody opens the mute and says L'chaim together. That's one rule. Everybody must obey. The second rule is that this is not a class, and nobody is giving a lecture here. We're talking together. So anybody who has something on their mind, it would be beautiful if you will send me a message on the chat, and it would be beautiful to hear responses and thoughts that you have from what we are talking right now. And the third rule, if you don't mind, that's not an obligation, but if you don't mind, to open the cameras so we could at least see each other's faces. If we're still not meeting in person, as we said, hopefully very soon we will, in Yerushalayim maybe. But until then, let's open the cameras so we could feel a little bit together here. So I'm starting with the first L'chaim. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim, L'chaim, L'chaim.
Chaim.
L'chaim.
Chaim.
I know for some here it's still morning. In Israel it's in the evening, so we've passed a little bit in this day to do a L'chaim. But those of you who are in the morning right now, I'm sure it's much harder, and still we believe in you that you can have a L'chaim and drink as you could also in the morning. And I want to invite Rabbi Michel Falk to open the Farbrengen. Rabbi Michel Falk, the head of the Steinsaltz Yeshiva, to open the Farbrengen with a few words.
Thank you very much, Nathan. L'chaim. Thank you for all of you guys for joining us. Thank you to the Steinsaltz Yeshiva in organizing this beautiful Farbrengen, and to the Shalhevet Program. Thanks to you guys. This is happening already for the fourth time. It's actually been a very hectic, challenging weekend. I think when we meet in a Farbrengen, one of the basic, essential elements of a Farbrengen is that you come with your heart and with your whole being. And that sometimes means that you're all happy and joyful and excited, and sometimes mean that you're coming with a broken heart. So I personally, and my guess is that there are many others around here that had a tough couple days now after what we had in Meron. It was Thursday night. It was a very, very exciting evening over here in Israel. Finally, for the first time after over a year, we were able to really party together. And it was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that was the one who, on his day of passing, that finally the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. And for us in Israel, it was a special occasion that both our ability to be together and the COVID finally looks like is getting slowly less and less. And then suddenly this terrible tragedy happened in Meron. Personally, we had many students over there that were very near to the big tragedy. We had some of the students who were helping out over there, taking out the bodies of those that were in the big tragedy. We had one of the students from the yeshiva that was on one of the ambulances trying to help over there in Meron. I saw them all on Friday morning coming back to the yeshiva in Tekoa, all confused, all really broken. We had a very special Shabbos together. It's I'm sure for all of us not easy. So first of all, I think we should do a l'chaim and pray for those that are still in the hospitals, that they have complete health, and those that have broken hearts, that might even be tougher to find a medicine for that. The Rabbi Steinsaltz always would say, Harofeh l'shvurei lev, the one who was the only doctor that could heal the broken hearts is God. So we're asking God to help all of us with the broken hearts and the families, so many families that are broken now, so many friends and yeshivas and communities that are broken. So l'chaim for that.
L'chaim.
I just want to add two other thoughts. I think that the very basic element of being part of the Jewish people, it's not a religion, it's a family. And I think when somebody from your family is suffering or had a great tragedy, it needs to be very clear that it's my tragedy, it's my suffering. And if it doesn't hurt me, there's something wrong going on over there. And the same as when somebody from my family has a simcha, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, a happy occasion. If I'm not happy with him, there's something wrong over there. So I think in these times, it's part of being a normal Jewish people, Jewish family, that we our hearts are hurting, our hearts are bleeding, and Be'ezrat Hashem, with God's help, we will get to Shavuot with a smile and with more life and additional life, because as we always say after somebody passes away, we say Kaddish. And the idea of Kaddish, as they say in Aramaic, Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah. The additional, you need to make it bigger, you need to add. After those 45 righteous men that passed away just because they wanted to celebrate and pray and have that spiritual
Was it all men?
Experience,
Of course,
that in
itself
is something that we need to add to now. There's a big gap that we, the Jewish people, need to add on. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we decided that we were going to have this Farbrengen together, is because we need to add more and do more l'chaim and do more mitzvahs and do more prayer and be nicer and be open up our hearts more to our other fellows and neighbors and family. So I think that's a very basic way of relating to such a tragedy in according to Judaism. If I can add just one more idea over here, as I was preparing for this Farbrengen and trying to really get back to life, because this is why I need you guys. I need some life, some l'chaim, some nigunim, some singing, some happiness. I remember there's a very special piece of Talmud in Menachot that talks about Moses, which actually is a Talmud piece that is relating to Moses as he goes up to receive the Torah from heaven. And he sees that that Hashem, that God is busy over there, still making these extra ktarim. If anybody looked in a Torah, he would see that there's these special additions to every letter on the top. And he asks, what's the story? So he says, oh, there's this great rabbi, Rabbi Akiva, that he's going to take each one of these letters and he's going to study it and learn from each one of these letters something new. And the story goes on, and I'm going to make it short. I'm going to go to the end of the piece of Talmud. And he asks Hashem, he asks God, tell me what kind of a prize, what kind of a payment, tell me this great rabbi, Rabbi Akiva, who just, by the way, was the rabbi of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the hero of Lag Ba'omer, of the Zohar, of the Kabbalah. And God shows him that Rabbi Akiva is one of those 10 that the Romans killed in such a terrible, painful way. And Moses, as in many places in the Talmud isn't censored, just as other Jewish books are not censored, and the toughest questions already are over there mentioned. And Moses comes out to God and says, this is what you give him after being such a great rabbi? This is what he deserves? And then the answer that Moses, the one who gave us the Torah, the only one that was such a prophet, the answer he gets from God was, Shtok, kach ala b'machshava lefanav. There's no answer that I could answer to you. Just be quiet. I'm not going to explain myself. So I think in many ways, that's the secret that we as Jewish people that are obligated, and thanks God, we all over here are busy studying the Torah, if it's with a chavruta in Shalhevet, or if it's in other classes on your own. It's our obligation to study as much as we can and to understand as much as we can and to question as much as we can. But at the same time, there's that secret. And it's that secret that is part of the Torah. It's part of the Torah that Moses gave us in Mount Sinai. And I think that that's part of the Torah that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when we learn Kabbalah, when we learn anything that has to do with mysticism, I think what makes it Kabbalah, in Hebrew you call it Torat HaSod. It's the secrets of the Torah. That secret is something that's going to stay a secret no matter what. And I think what we need to make sure is that secret is part of our Torah learning, and that we always remember that there's that element that we can't really understand and is going to stay a secret. And that's actually what I think makes it so special. And Arthur, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your thoughts about Kabbalah, about secrets, about mysticism in our Jewish lives. And again, l'chaim for all of those that need a l'chaim. L'chaim for all of us that need a l'chaim. L'chaim. L'chaim Rabbi Pinny. L'chaim Rabbi Shmuley. L'chaim. L'chaim.
Thank you so much, Aaron and Yedidia. Arthur, please.
Thank you. The question on the table this afternoon or this evening or this morning is, how is Jewish mysticism an essential part of our Jewish tradition? I want to begin by saying that over 30 years ago, I took Rabbi Steinsaltz to an annual meeting of the New York Board of Rabbis, who had invited Rabbi Steinsaltz to speak as the keynote speaker for that year. By the way, the New York Board of Rabbis is a miracle organization where Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist rabbis all get together and everyone gets out alive. On the day of Rabbi L'chaim. On the day of Rabbi Steinsaltz's lecture, the place was mobbed, and every available space was filled with rabbis eager to hear Rabbi Steinsaltz address the group. Rabbi Steinsaltz got up to the podium and began by saying, Kabbalah is the official theology of the Jewish people. The rabbi then said, let me repeat myself. Kabbalah is the official theology of the Jewish people. And then Rabbi Steinsaltz said to all the rabbis present, if you're not studying it, if you're not learning it, if you're not teaching it to your congregations, one can honestly say that you're not doing your job. The rabbi then proceeded to spend the next hour proving his thesis. And in the large room, one can hear a pin drop as Rabbi Steinsaltz explained the statement. This then is my first response to our topic today. How is Jewish mysticism an essential part of our Jewish tradition? As Rabbi Steinsaltz has written, there was never a separation of any real consequence between the daily obligations and open practice of Judaism and the esoteric or mystical aspects of tradition. And since the 16th century, there's been a consensus accepted by almost every Jew that if there's a normative Jewish theology, it is the integration of the two never really separate parts, the Kabbalah of the Ari and the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Joseph Caro. Elsewhere, Rabbi Steinsaltz wrote, Kabbalah is the inner spiritual dimension of the Torah. One doesn't have to look far to see the connection between Kabbalah and Jewish practice. Let me just offer a few examples. For example, the Seder Plate. The Seder Plate of Pesach is a representation of the 10 Sfirot of Kabbalah. The Sfirot make up some of the essential vocabulary of Kabbalah, and the configuration of the Seder Plate is made of 6 symbols on the plate, 3 pieces of matzah, and the plate itself, 10 in all, just like the 10 Sfirot of Kabbalah. Or Kabbalat Shabbat. Every Friday night, Kabbalat Shabbat service is a Kabbalistic ceremony. The Chododi, for example, is actually a Kabbalistic poem. Or Tefillin. While we wear tefillin and that is discussed in the detail in the Talmud, the 7 times we wrap it around our arm actually has a Kabbalistic source and explanation. Or Ushpizin, the custom of inviting 7 shepherds as our guests into our sukkah every year comes from the masters of Kabbalah. I want to mention also the Vilna Gaon, who we often think of as a strict Lithuanian halachist, is in fact also the author of perhaps the greatest commentary on Sefer Yetzirah, one of the earliest and most important Kabbalistic texts. And Joseph Caro, who's the author of the authoritative Code of Jewish Law, was one of the great Kabbalists as well. I once asked Rabbi Steinsaltz, what is a good topic to study that's suitable for a 5-year-old child? And Rabbi Steinsaltz said, teach them about infinity. Contemplation of the nature of infinity is a profoundly important one and is often discussed in great detail and intensity in the major works of Kabbalah. As Rabbi Steinsaltz writes in his book, The 13-Petaled Rose, which, by the way, the rabbi himself describes not as a book on Kabbalah, but a book of Kabbalah, the rabbi writes, we know in the realm of abstract thought, such as mathematics and philosophy, infinity is that which is beyond measure and beyond grasp, while at the same time, the term is limited by its very definition as being a quality of something finite. For example, there are many things in the world, such as numbers, that may have infinity as one of their attributes, and yet also be limited either in function or purpose or in its very nature. But the rabbi then writes, but when we speak of the infinite, blessed be he, we mean the utmost of perfection and abstraction, that which encompasses everything and is beyond all possible limits. Rabbi Steinsaltz continued and wrote, the only thing we are permitted to say about the infinite then would involve the negative of all qualities. For the infinite is beyond anything that can be grasped in any terms, either positive or negative. Not only is it impossible to say of the infinite that he is in any way limited or he is bad, one cannot even say the opposite, that God is vast or he is good. Just as he is not matter, he is not spirit, nor can he be said to exist in any dimension meaningful to us. The dilemma posed by this meaning of infinity, the Rabbi wrote, is more than the consequence of the inadequacy of the human mind. It represents a simply unbridgeable gap, a gap that cannot be crossed by anything definable. Incidentally, Rabbi Steinsaltz once told me during a conversation we were having about God and faith to consider a theorem in geometry called Desargues' theorem. Desargues' theorem is relatively easy to understand, but the problem, Rabbi Steinsaltz said to me, is that it cannot be proven until one imagines a point in the infinite. And so it is with our faith in the Almighty. It's only after we invite the infinite one, blessed be he, into our lives that things change radically. It seems imperative that we take Rabbi Steinsaltz's advice and pursue the study of Kabbalah. Rabbi Steinsaltz wrote, today assimilation has reached proportions the likes of which we have not seen in over 2,000 years. The majority of the Jewish people has no interest in Judaism. We know how to deal with one apostate or what to do in the case of one minor misfortune, but how do we cope with the kind of traumatic phenomenon that affects an entire people? Assimilation today, Rabbi Steinsaltz wrote, is an entirely different kind of problem from what we have dealt with in the past. It is a crisis like no other. How then is Jewish mysticism an essential part of Jewish tradition? Sophisticated thought is terribly absent from synagogues today. We are busy learning history and customs, but almost totally neglect the abstract theological notions that are at the core of Jewish faith. Sophisticated ideas are discussed in so many realms of modern life, but they're absent from Jewish life. So much so that spiritual seekers find nothing in Judaism to challenge or stimulate them often. It is essential that we change this approach to Jewish education and Jewish life. As Rabbi Steinsaltz points out, if the local rabbis are not learning and teaching Kabbalah, they're not doing their jobs. Speaking of spiritual seekers, have you ever ventured into a New Age bookstore filled with all kinds of lofty and challenging books from the world's religions? There are sophisticated books about Buddhism and Hinduism and many other spiritual traditions, but there's rarely a section of Jewish books. And if there is such a section, the Jewish books represented are often the wrong ones for the Jewish seeker. For example, I once went into a New Age bookstore that had a Jewish section, but the only books that were there were a few Jewish cookbooks and some Jewish joke books. In another such bookstore, the Judaica section had, to my great surprise, copies of Rabbi Steinsaltz's first translated volume into English of the Talmud Bava Metzia. On the one hand, I was delighted to see Rabbi Steinsaltz represented in the shop, but when you open to the first page of Bava Metzia, you read, if this man grabs a garment and that man grabs a garment, and each man insists that it's his garment, whose garment is it? In other words, a Jewish seeker with no Jewish knowledge goes into a New Age bookstore looking for spiritual nourishment, and he or she finds so many books from Eastern traditions discussing holiness and faith. But in the Jewish bookstore, he finds the discussion about who owns a shmata. How is Jewish mysticism an essential part of Jewish tradition? It's essential because it is perhaps our last hope for the Jewish seeker to find something worthwhile to study. In other words, while it is said that in the past one had to be 40 years old and married and steeped in Torah to study Kabbalah, today it's the opposite. We must begin with the abstract notions of theology to grab a seeker's soul. Books like the 13-Petal Rose are the essential books of Kabbalah today that even have a chance to attract the spiritual seeker. Let me mention just a few ideas from the 13-Petal Rose that can stimulate the mind of a Jewish seeker. Number one, we are not just a body, and we are not just a body that has a soul. Rather, we are a soul that has a body. The soul uses the body for a certain amount of time and then drops the body and continues on. This sounds like it comes from some book on Eastern spiritual traditions, but in fact, it's a fundamental belief within the Jewish faith. Or number two, right and wrong. Right and wrong ways of action are not listed as purely good or bad within Judaism. We have a different approach to how we live our lives. We don't say that love is always good and hate is always bad. Rather, everything has to do with timing and dosage. Sometimes love is the worst possible reaction to a situation. Sometimes hate is precisely what is called for in a certain situation. Or honesty, for example. Honesty is not good by definition. I don't go into the hospital and say, Grandma, you look worse than you did yesterday. Rather, the Jew on the spiritual path must be alert and conscious to all of the time in order to decide just which human emotions and reactions are called for in each particular situation. This is the kind of principle that Jewish spiritual seekers need to know about. Or number three, as Rabbi Steinsaltz teaches, if you think you've arrived, you're lost. If you think you've arrived, you're lost. Or number four, Rabbi Steinsaltz teaches every descent is for the sake of ascension. On the Jewish spiritual path, there's no such thing as down. Down is just the preparation for the next climb upward. Life itself, as the rabbi says, is a descent for the sake of ascension. By the way, Rabbi Steinsaltz teaches that learning is not necessarily grasping what is new. Each of us already knows the entire Torah, but we've forgotten it. Life is a process of remembering what one already knows but has forgotten. So Rabbi Steinsaltz describes in his book, The 13-Petaled Rose, he writes, this little book is a book for the soul. And if a person permits his soul to listen, the soul will soon learn that all it needs to do is remember, because in some dim and enigmatic way, it already knows all of this. What is the Jewish way of holiness? What is the Jewish way of holiness, Rabbi writes? How does one prepare to live a holy life? We study the Talmud, which is a vast work of 63 volumes, filled with questions, thousands of questions and doubts and uncertainty. And then we set aside our Talmud and it's time to pray. We express our faith. We then set the prayer book aside and we go back to our Talmud, where we ask questions upon questions upon questions until we once again set it aside and pick up our prayer book, a single volume of faith. We travel back and forth between faith and doubts. And as Rabbi Steinsaltz writes, to get stuck in either one is a grievous error. But the fluctuation back and forth between the two is the Jewish way of holiness. Many of us are occupied with questions: who am I? Where do I come from? What is life all about? Where am I going? As Rabbi Steinsaltz teaches, these are important questions, but they are not questions that we merely think of ourselves. Rather, when I find myself wondering where I am in my world, I'm actually hearing the voice of God, asking the same question that the Almighty asked of Adam: where are you? Where indeed am I? How is Jewish mysticism an essential part of tradition? Because Kabbalah provides the place where Jews ask such questions. In closing, let me say that 40 years ago, when I was 30 years old, I was just beginning to learn about Judaism. I was not provided with a Jewish education as a child, but I found myself trying to read The 13-Petaled Rose. I chipped away at the book, word by word, phrase by phrase. Idea by idea. One day I found myself in the New York City subway on the line called the F train. Among other things, the F line goes from the Orthodox neighborhoods of Brooklyn to Manhattan. And every day I traveled to my office in Manhattan on the F train. I loved it because it was like Jewish Disney World to me. There were bearded men studying from the Talmud. There were modest women who were quietly reciting the Psalms. You could organize a minyan on every car. On one fateful afternoon, traveling back on the F train to where I lived in Brooklyn, I happened to sit next to an elderly chassid. I was reading The 13-Petaled Rose by Rabbi Steinsaltz, and the chassid was reading the New York Post. I was feeling very good about myself. I remembered learning that if you travel a few cubits with a fellow Jew, you should talk Torah with him. But on the New York subway, one rarely ever speaks with a stranger. Yet I wanted to speak to this old chassid sitting to my right. After all, a cubit is like a yardstick, and we were traveling much more than just a few yards together. Finally, I drummed up enough courage to begin the conversation. Excuse me, I said, did you ever see this book? I showed him my copy of the 13-Petaled Rose, and I handed it to him, and he flipped through the pages. And as he flipped through the pages, he said, I don't usually look at books unless they have at least 2 haskamas. Now, I happen to know from my genealogy research that a haskama is like a seal of approval, where a rabbi will write in the front of the book that this book is an acceptable kosher book. At that moment, I wondered where the seal of approval was on his New York Post. But I didn't say that because after all, I was trying to make a friend. He then surprised me and he said, I never saw this book, and the haskama is not all that important. What's the book about, he asked. So I showed him the table of contents with chapters like Torah and Holiness and Mitzvot. And I said to the man, it's a book about Jewish thought. And then I said to him, may I ask you a question? And he said, yes. And I turned to a page in the book and read it to him. This is the page that I read to this old chassid on the subway that day. Rabbi Steinsaltz writes, it has been said that each of the letters of the Torah has some corresponding soul. That is to say, every soul is a letter in the entire Torah and has its own part to play. The soul that has completed its task, that has done what it has to do in terms of creating or repairing its own part of the world and realizing its own essence, that soul can wait after death for the perfection of the world as a whole. But not all souls are so privileged. Many souls stray for one reason or another. Sometimes a person does not do all the proper things, and sometimes he misuses forces and spoils his portion and the portion of others. Rabbi Steinsaltz wrote, in such cases, the soul does not complete its task and may even itself be damaged by contact with the world. It has not managed to complete that portion of reality which only this particular soul can complete, and therefore, after the death of the body, the soul returns and is reincarnated in the body of another person, and again must try and complete what it failed to correct or what it injured in the past. I put the book down and I said to the chassid, do we believe this? Do Jews believe in reincarnation? He said, of course. And I said to him, I never heard of it before. So he asked me where I received my Jewish education. And I told him that I barely had any Jewish education. So he said, well, this is why you never heard of it. So we began to have a conversation. I repeated to him that I did not receive much of a Jewish education. And then I went on to tell him my struggles with Judaism, the difficulties I was having in integrating Jewish ideas into my mind and heart, and additional difficulties in trying to observe the mitzvot. At one point, the old chassid looked at me and he said, you know, you're luckier than I am. I'm luckier than you are, I exclaimed. I just told him about my many struggles in learning and practicing Judaism. How am I luckier than you are, I insisted. He said to me, every Jew is connected to God by a rope. As you know, when a rope breaks, as in your case, meaning my case, after you find the ends of the rope and tie them back together, the rope is shorter and stronger than it was before it broke. The old chassid looked at me and said, you're closer to God than I will ever be. It was at that moment when I learned 2 things. First, I learned that one shouldn't even go a few cubits with a fellow Jew without talking Torah. And 2, this chassid gave me what I have come to know as the metaphor for my whole life. After all, I'm trying to find the ends of the broken rope and tie them back together. How is Jewish mysticism an essential part of our Jewish tradition? It is the stuff that allows people like me to mend their broken rope, to mend their connection to God, and to come closer to Jewish tradition. L'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim. L'chaim, Arthur.
Hi, Martha.
Chaim.
L'chaim.
Chaim.
Ay, 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 da 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 da, ay, 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 hey, ay, da 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 da, ay, 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 da 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 da, ay, 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 na 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 ay ay die, 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 die. I didn't die, die, mama. I didn't die, I didn't die, yeah. I didn't die, die, I didn't die, die. Ay, 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 ay. Did it die, did it die, die, die. I did it die, die, die. Oh. Ay, 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 ay. Oh, I didn't die, die, I die, die. I didn't die, die, I die, die. Ay, 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 ay. Hey, I didn't die, die, die. I did it, I died, oh, yo, 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 yo.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Thank you, L'chaim, L'chaim. I just want to mention to all the people who joined that in this Farbrengen, when we say L'chaim, everybody says L'chaim together. Open your mute and join the L'chaim together. And also I want to suggest, since Arthur spoke a lot about the 13-petaled rose, that if you look for a podcast on the 13-petaled rose by the Tekoa Yeshiva, you could hear the podcast and be exposed to the words of Rav Steinsaltz in a special and nice way. And now I want to ask Rabbi Shmuley Green to add some of his thoughts to what Arthur spoke.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I will add a few words to what Arthur spoke gladly, and I'm so glad Arthur spoke, because when Arthur speaks, I listen. There used to be a commercial like that. I don't know if everybody remembers that, when E.F. Hutton speaks. Anyway, it's good to see old friends and new friends and not yet friends. It's good to see everybody. And this is a great segue. Thank you, Arthur, for the segue and the plug, because Arthur and I and my wife here and a couple of other people are on a little learning session, a learning group that's studying the 13 petaled rose every Wednesday night here at 9 o'clock. You're more than welcome to join. I'll put my number in here right after, and you can join. And one of the common themes, there are a couple of common themes that come up in the 13 petal rose, is the dichotomy between the insignificance of the human being, especially compared to when you start to understand, and when one starts to understand the vastness and the greatness of the world and how it's created, and especially talking thereafter about God and infinity. So on the one hand, Rabbi Steinsaltz emphasizing the Kabbalah and the Zohar, where Shim Bar Yochai is discussing and urging us to contemplate that insignificance. And on the other hand, keeps on coming back, the Zohar and the Kabbalah and Judaism as a whole, keeps on coming back to the significance of the human being, especially the Jew, all at the same time. And I want to bring this down and make it real. We're in tough days right now. And Rabbi Steinsaltz would always say that if Farbrengen, without coming to the practical, it's like, what's left of it? That's the question that needs to be asked after every Farbrengen. What's left? So you drank, you sang, so what's left? And if there's nothing left, then what was it worth? So we have to make it worthwhile. And so there's a lot of talk now about the unity of the Jewish people and unifying the Jewish people and feeling together, like Rabbi Michel mentioned at the beginning, feeling together and being like a family, etc. But I heard Rabbi Steinsaltz once say, and I'm going to be a little bit Farbrengen-like, especially in the style of Rabbi Steinsaltz. So hold on to your chairs. And he said, Achdus, the unity of the Jewish people is like the weather. Everybody talks about it, but nobody can really do anything about it. And can really do anything about it. And so we can, though. On the one hand, it's a great, great task. It's a big task. And maybe we're insignificant. On the other hand, that doesn't mean we can't be responsible. And we are responsible. And what we do is significant. And there are things that we need to do and we have to do. People on this call and all over. And that's my wife's and mine, shlichut, I guess, by Rabbi Steinsaltz in this crazy country called the United States of America for so many years, is to promote this concept that everybody is responsible, everybody can do something and must do something. And it means real achdut comes from that exact contemplation of understanding that on the one hand, we're insignificant, that it's not all about me. It's not all about me. I'm not the center of the world. It's a whole world out there. And even beyond the world that I see with my physical eyes, there's a whole world beyond that. And there's a whole world beyond that. Come to the 13 petal rose class. You'll see what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Another plug. Shameless plug. And there's a whole world beyond that. And then that's not even getting even close to what we're talking about God, if there is even such a thing as close, like Arthur was describing regarding infinity. But at the same time, with that insignificance and that contemplation, that thought and that attitude of understanding that we're nothing, and I'm not the center of the world, I'm a little speck. That brings me to the idea of, therefore, at the same time, every act of mine is significant. And everything that I do is significant, and I'm demanded to do things. So Achdut comes from this contemplation of understanding I'm not the center of the world, it's not all about me. And therefore, there are other people in the world, and there are other needs, and I'm here to take care of them. I become slowly, because of the Kabbalah and because of the attitude that it promotes, I become slowly but surely, instead of a taker, a giver. Instead of somebody who feels like magia li, that I deserve anything, to a giver, that my actions and my thoughts and my deeds have significance for others. And I'm going to help, and I'm going to be there. I'm going to do something, and I'm even going to live in America, even if it kills me, to help other Jews. Because that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, to help other people, to be there for other people, and to push other people and encourage other people to do the same. Because if we don't do it, nobody else is going to. So everybody to take upon themselves, shall, and I will take upon themselves to do one extra thing to become a giver and not a taker, to give somebody who is world set, I don't even know how to say this, but not centered around me, but centered around everything else around me and everybody else around me. And when we do this slowly but surely, that creates unity. That creates yachdut. That creates a sense of family, because I'm here to give. What would I not do for my children? Because they're my family. What would I not do for my parents, my siblings, etc.? If we could start feeling like that about other people around us, then slowly but surely we create. And sense of care doesn't just mean sense of care to take care in a way. It also means to push people and to demand from other people and to ask people for help and to help other people all at the same time. Because it's not about me. I'm insignificant. I need you. You need me. We need to do more. We need to do more. And it can't be relied upon. The rabbis can't be relied upon. The political leaders cannot be relied upon. Even Rabbi Michel Falk, who is the head of yeshiva, cannot be relied upon. God forbid. God forbid.
I am Rabbi Shmuley. Thank you.
Just a bit, you can rely. Right? But it's not going to end up at his doorstep at the end of the day. It's also going to end up at his doorstep, but it's going to end up at our doorstep. What are we doing? What are we doing? How much Torah are we learning? How much Torah are we teaching? How much good deeds are we doing? How much are we helping? How much charity are we giving? At the end of the day, the buck stops here, right here, right here. This is where the buck stops. Doesn't stop anywhere else. So, l'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
That is the message going towards Mount Sinai. Responsibility, and we're in it all together. L'chaim.
Chaim.
L'chaim, Martha. L'chaim all.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Shmuley. And I want to immediately ask Rabbi Allouche from Congregation Beit Tefilla to add more thoughts on his part.
All right, thank you so much, Nathan. Thank you, Arthur, for those moving words, and Shmuley also. Thank you, Rabbi Michel. It's always a pleasure Farbrengen here with everyone, with the unity of heart and unity of purpose. So after the Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away, they discovered diaries that he kept in his drawer, diaries of notes that he had written over the many, many years, particularly over his years before he was the Rebbe in Europe. And they were then compiled and published. And these notes are known as Reshimot until this very day. And there are many, many gems and treasures in those notes. But there is a story that the late Lubavitcher Rebbe shared in the Reshimot, a story about the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Bear, when he was about 6 years old. He was playing with his older brother, Zalman Aaron. And the game they were playing was the game of the rabbi and the student. Zalman Aaron was the rabbi, or the Hasidic Rebbe, and Shalom Bear was the 6-year-old student. Zalman Aaron, who was maybe 8 or 9 years old, he tells his younger brother, Shalom Bear, you're my student now, I'm the Rebbe, come, we're playing this game, ask me any question you may have. So Shalom Bear says to Zalman Aaron, look, I sinned, I did this and this mistake. I need a tikkun. I need you to tell me how to repair my mistake. And Zalman Aaron immediately responded on how he should go about repairing this mistake. Shalom Bear, the 6-year-old, tells the 9-year-old Rebbe, Zalman Aaron, my Rebbe, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're a fake Rebbe. Zalman says, why? And the 6-year-old says, you're a fake Rebbe because a true Rebbe would have first sighed before answering. He would have first felt. I'm sharing this because in a way, I think it's very much connected to the title today and everything that was so beautifully said before. But you know that on Shavuot, we are told that the Jewish nation saw the voices and heard the sights. Kol ha'am ro'im et hakolot. Now, of course, what does this mean? That the Jewish people saw the voices. They heard the voices, not saw the voices, How can you see voices? And the Hasidic commentaries, based of course on Kabbalah, teach us that that's the ultimate way to unite with God and to unite with the God in others, to unite with people. How so? Not just by seeing them, but by hearing them, by hearing and their voices to a point that you can almost see those voices. That's how deep your connection is. You're not just listening to some noise, but you are hearing them so deeply that your hearing becomes a sight. I know that in English, there's an expression that says seeing is believing. Well, I would say that Judaism very viciously opposes to that expression. We don't believe that seeing is believing. I think that hearing is believing much more than seeing. You know, even in English, we use the word sight all the time, foresight, hindsight, vision. Even when people tell us something, we say to them, yes, I see, I see. But I think that the ultimate way of connecting is through a sight that is so profound, so deep, that I can see the voices, see that which the naked eye does not necessarily see. You know, when I received my smicha, I went to Rabbi Steinsaltz and I asked him, what is this certificate all about? Fine, I have a diploma, and so what? And Rabbi Steinsaltz told me that being a rabbi means that people will come to you now with many questions, but your task as a rabbi is to understand the question behind the question, to be able to truly, again, connect in such a way that you emit a sigh, that you really feel the person to the point that you can see his voices. And he went on to share with me two separate stories. One story was about Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank, who was the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, happens to be the father-in-law of Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, the noted chief rabbi of Israel of some 20 years ago. Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank, one day in his office in Geula, there's a knock on the door. He opens up the door and he sees a 7-year-old girl. This is again the story Rabbi Steinsaltz tells me, a 7-year-old girl holding one egg in her hand. And she says to Rabbi Frank, I came here from Talpiot, the other side of the city. And I just want you to let me know if I can eat this egg because it has a small spot of blood on the yellow part of the egg. Now, halachically, if there's blood on the yellow of the egg, then it has to be thrown away. Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank says to her, well, you came from Talpiot? She says, yes. He says, how old are you? 7 years old. You notice she's also barefoot. So he says to her, of course you can have this egg. Goodbye. The students who were there came to Rabbi Frank and says, but it's a halacha that says that you can't eat an egg that has a blood spot on the yellow of it. And Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank says, you don't see who this girl was? She came from the other side of the town, barefoot, with just one egg in her hand, not a dozen egg, one egg. Who knows? She might be dependent on that egg for her only meal of the day. And in cases like this, the halakha also says that when you're so poor and you're dependent on such a meal, then of course you're allowed to eat that egg. You have to look at the person behind the question, not just at the question itself. And he went on to tell me another story about another chief rabbi of Jerusalem, Rabbi Shmuel Salant of some 100 years ago, who once attended a wedding. And outside, in the middle of the wedding, this man comes running out of the kitchen and says, gosh, something terrible happened. It looks like we won't be able to serve meat. And Rabbi Shmuel Salant went and approached this man and he said, well, what happened? And the man says, well, the pot of meat was all ready to be served, and all of a sudden from nowhere, a huge pot of milk came and spilled, the whole milk spilled into that pot of meat. Mixing meat and milk together, of course, is prohibited, and there wasn't enough of meat to counter the milk. And according to halacha, you need, right, it has to be batel b'shishim, it needs to be nullified in 60. There must be 60 times the amount of meat against the milk, but there isn't 60 times the amount of meat against the milk, and therefore no one will be able to eat meat at this wedding. Rabbi Shmuel of Salant says, don't jump to conclusions so quickly, let me research this. After about 45 minutes, he came back to this man, came back to the kitchen, and he said, you're allowed to have the meat. So how could that be? There isn't 60 times the amount of meat against the milk. It's impossible, Rabbi Shmuel. And Rabbi Shmuel said, you don't understand. I just spoke to my neighbor. My neighbor happens to be a milkman. And I asked him a simple question. How much water do they add in the milk before they actually sell it? And he told me how much. Based on our calculation, there is 60 times the amount of meat against the milk, because there's really not enough milk. That's just milk mixed with water, but the actual amount of milk is really smaller than the 60 times amount of meat that there is against it. And that's the second story that Rabbi Steinsaltz told me, to make his point that when we connect to people, we have to understand the people behind the questions, not just the question themselves. Understand that there's poverty in Jerusalem and there's a wedding to be celebrated. And therefore, let's try our best to truly make this meat kosher, or let's make this egg kosher, or let's make the other person, in spite of his many seeming deficiencies, also kosher in the eyes, so that we can connect heart to heart and soul to soul. To see the voices is not a simple task, as Shmuley was saying. It's something that it can't be treated like the weather, like Rabbi Steinsaltz was telling you, Rabbi Shmuley. Something that has to be treated truly with empathy and with true care and true love. But it's something that is no doubt achievable. And I think that if there is one episode, not that we needed it, but one episode that proves this case, that it is indeed achievable, is how Jews across the world felt the pain of these 45 holy Jews who were crushed to death in Meron just a few days ago. And we still feel the pain. All of those injured, please God, Hashem will bless them with a full and speedy recovery. We are united, no doubt, in heart, and we feel that unity when tragedy comes about. As Rabbi Lau said the other day, we're experts at knowing how to die together, but we're amateurs at knowing how to live together. And it's about time indeed that we learn how to see the voices, not just in moments of tragedy, but also in moments of happiness, in moments of Farbrengen, in moments of Shalhevet study, in moments of just simple encounters or simple meetings that we have throughout the day. It could also be just simple highs and goodbyes with the cashier in the supermarket. But if we can exercise the true empathy, the seeing the voices, that like Rabbi Steinsaltz excelled at. I remember that meeting, attending many meetings with Rabbi Steinsaltz, he was always afterwards very, very exhausted. And I could tell that he would take in all of the pain and all of the nuances that he would feel in the room by meeting people with all sorts of issues. But it became his personal issues because he knew how to see the voices. So if we can have Rabbi Steinsaltz as our model, and if we can remember these moments of tragedy in which we do see the voices, Baruch Hashem, at least during those moments, but even during those happy times, even during the times in which Baruch Hashem, the sun is shining, then no doubt we will achieve that ultimate unity. We'll achieve what the Jewish people achieved on Mount Sinai. And please God, then no doubt, maybe we'll merit the ultimate redemption with the coming of Mashiach. May it happen speedily. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim.
Chaim.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Pinney. And I want to add one step further in what you said, that my feeling is that what we're doing here in Shalhevet is really all about unity. It's all about getting together, Jews from Israel and Jews from the States right now. Hopefully it'll expand to the whole world. People who have one common denominator, which is our Torah, and our what connects us together is the fact that we have our traditions, and getting together, I feel is one of the biggest answers we can give also to this huge tragedy. More learning, setting up time with our chavruta weekly, getting more and more in touch with each other, and it doesn't matter what our background is, and feeling together in what we have in our traditions. And I use this opportunity to say that we're getting closer to to we're together for quite a few months now, and we feel this is a time, especially after this great tragedy, to bring in more people to join Shalhevet and to make Shalhevet a more vibrant community that really means something and something deep to the participants of Shalhevet. So I invite you, all of us, also to participate more, to make the chavruta something deeper in your life, to make a deeper connection with your chavruta. Anybody who doesn't have a chavruta is invited to ask for a chavruta, to join the lectures that we have every month, and to join the Farbrengens, and to bring in more people, more people who might be interested in studying and having a chavruta, an Israeli chavruta, and studying Torah together. We're very close to the end. I want to ask Yoel Patashnik, one of the participants in Shalhevet from Israel, to say a few more words. Then we'll have another nigun and we'll say goodbye for now. Yoel, please.
So I guess I'm in the precarious position of standing in the way of your freedom. So I'll try to keep this brief. I must, first of all, begin and say that I'm totally embarrassed that I didn't even bring my l'chaim into the room. And I can already hear Rav Steinsaltz's voice saying, of course you forgot it. What's new? I remember once when I was in Shir Aleph or Shir Beth, 16, 17, and he gave a Farbrengen, and I came to him a couple of days afterwards and I had a question. And he asked me, did you drink? And I said, no. And he says, so how are you going to understand what I had to say? So I said, no, Rabbi, really? He says, really? So, okay, so here I am, and all these years later, and I still haven't learned much. I'm going to try to keep it brief. I just want to maybe share an idea or two. We go on paths, and the paths lead us into different places. And I think maybe simplistically, our paths are usually somewhere between our comfort zone and our need for maybe excitement or to be challenged. Or as a contemporary thinker said, his experience is bad as being positioned between Kotsk and Mezhibush. And I think in many ways, this is true of most of us. Yes, you got the name right. To quote another Achron, Herman Melville, who says that one of the unbelievable enjoyments in this world is to be like totally warm under your blanket and have your nose freezing. So we are usually stumbling between those two sides, and these paths are not always the same intensity or the same length. In Chelm, they used to say that it's incredible that it only takes 1 month to get from Purim to Pesach, but a full year almost to get back. So we don't always know. We don't always know where they take us. So I wanted to offer a really brief idea about this pathway between Pesach, between Shavuos. And we know in Hasidic thought, we're not counting upwards, but rather we're counting down. We're starting from a high sphera, a high counting, and we're trying to make it part of us, try to bring down a deep idea and integrate it within ourselves. And we know that there's a age-old discussion or a machlekes between the Baitusim or the Tzdukim and Am Yisrael, that they say that we must begin our count from Shabbat, from Shabbos, and whereas we, based on the oral law, we begin our counting from Yom Tov. And famously, again, Shabbos is the absolute day, it's untainted by man, whereas Yom Tov is a chutzpah. It's mamish a chutzpah. We tell God when he is to make his holidays. And again, another memory, I remember, again, the early years, maybe Shana Aleph or Beit, and I don't even remember what led to this, but I remember Rav Steinsaltz pulling out a Gemara and showing me where it says that the Eibush, the God waits for the basing to convene before he can do anything. And I'm thinking that, okay, Shabbos is a clear revelation, right? It's not ours. We're forced to do it. We stop our world and we look at our family. We stand there on Shabbos night. We look at the world as if for the first time. We see our spouses, our children, and we stop and we give them a bracha. We stop. And it's a beautiful revelation, but it's not ours.
And on the other hand, the Yom Tov, which is so not absolute, it's so relative, it's based in with their considerations and their ability to err on their decisions, they're bringing another revelation into the world. And I was thinking that maybe it's the revelation of a relationship. And I'm sort of thinking of like, when a 3-year-old or 4-year-old, they want to help us in the kitchen, right? That's always right. That's exactly the help that we need, right? Erev Shabbos you need, and whether it's a child or a grandchild, and we indulge them, and they're sure that without them there would not have been Shabbos, and we're sure that despite their help there still may be Shabbos, and I think that playfulness of the interaction between God and Am Yisrael is a deep relation, is a deep revelation. Remember, Rav Steinsaltz once talking about Hanukkah and saying how it's like to stop in total vachadika world, like the total weekday, and just stop and said, lay on your back and raise your feet above your head and look at the stars in a new way. Like look at the world, but you decide. Like you stop. Something has to remind you. And just want to end with a very, very brief idea that sort of touches on these crazy events that are so much part of these last couple of days. The question of adversity, like what do we do with it, and how do we? First of all, the answer is I have no idea. Let me start with that. But there's a beautiful Radziner Torah on this parsha, and he says that Emor el Kohanim b'nei Aaron, God says to Moshe, tell the Kohanim, whisper to the Kohanim. Amirah is usually a soft, a delicate statement. Lenefesh lo yitama be'amav. Like tell the Kohanim, whisper to them that when they approach death, when they approach doubt, when they approach darkness, whisper to them that there's something there. There's something to be revealed. But why whisper? And this is another Radziner Torah that has to do with a little bit what Shmulik was saying. He left, so I couldn't make fun of him that his beard is same color as it was 20 years ago, last time I saw him. But that when we're listening, we can maybe hear something if we can hear ourselves in a deep way. But on the other hand, if we try to listen too hard, we can become cruel. If we try to bring revelation from a dark place and try to offer it to someone else as a revelation, then we can already be cruel. So we always have to remain with the whispering. And Bezrat Hashem, and maybe if we're whispering to ourselves and whispering to each other at times of difficulty, we never know. Maybe we'll be able to see the stars through our feet when we're laying on the back. Who knows? Who knows? But in any case, we should be zeicha to cold noses and warm bodies and warm neshamas, and we should get together in this beautiful way, and many more opportunities. So I can't say really the Chaim because mamish botzeh berach neitz Hashem. So maybe Reb Michel can be moitzi me. I'm sitting here without a cup with the boishes panim in embarrassment.
Yo, Chaim, even you have some hope. Don't give up. Don't give up. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
We want to thank everybody who joined this Farbrengen. Stay tuned for more events from Shalhevet in the next few months, and of course the monthly lectures and the weekly learning with your chavruta. And may we all get more strength and more liveness, be more live and more connected from now and forever. Thank you very, very much. And l'chaim,
l'chaim. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Thank you.
L'chaim.
I did it on my I did it on my I
Chaim.
Chaim, goodbye, goodbye.
Thank you.
Yeah.